Hey everybody, Kris here. Quick note, today's episode is a little bit different. I am in the hot seat today. I had the opportunity during the International Climbers Festival to sit down with my friend Luke Mehall from the Climbing Zine and the Dirtbag State of Mind podcast and have a conversation with him about art, entrepreneurship, hip-hop, and how all those things can combine and how being creative has driven our life to this point. And I think it's a really fantastic conversation. I had a lot of fun doing it. If you aren't familiar with Luke, he is the curator, editor behind the Climbing Zine, which just celebrated its 20th volume and 10 years in the game, which is a huge accomplishment, particularly for a print magazine to be around for the last 10 years, to make its name in the last 10 years and to still be going strong and getting better and better is incredibly impressive. And I'm always impressed with what Luke does. I admire his willingness to put his creative vision out there, as well as to let other people have their creative voices in his publication. So thanks, Luke, for setting this up, for having this conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to all of the interviews in Season 2 of the Dirtbag State of Mind podcast. This conversation you're about to hear kicked off Season 2, and the second episode of Season 2 was my doppelganger podcaster, Kris. So check that one out while you're over there as well. All right, let's get into it.
Let's start with how we met each other, because it was a long and winding road to actually meeting people. I feel like in this industry, there's definitely people you know about.
Especially in the internet age, right? Like you hear people's names, you see their work before you actually meet them.
We were like rock and ice, letter to the editor kind of shit.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you were a climbing rapper.
Yep.
Still are.
Yep.
O-dub.
More rapper, less climbing rapper.
Yeah.
Less rapping about climbing, I guess.
No one's ever successfully pulled that off. But there's something I wrote into Rock and Ice. I was like, we got a B-boy crew, and we didn't. We were like, totally had no moves. Later, I did like take some breakdancing. I lived with a couple of breakdancers.
Yeah.
And so I have like my wedding party or, the circle at the dance party. I can do like my 4 breakdancing moves. But I was like, we don't rap, but we'll challenge you to a battle. And I sent that into Rock and Ice in probably 2004. I don't know if you ever saw that.
Yeah, totally. I remember it.
And then a bunch of time goes by and I heard your name up here in Lander once I started coming up here like 7 or 8 years ago. And I thought you were, there was 2 climbers named Kris Hampton because I thought I knew you as this climber rapper. And then I saw your name actually on art up here when I first heard about you again. It was with art.
Yep.
And then I realized you were the same person, but we still had never met.
There is another Kris Hampton. He's Australian, climber.
Kidding.
Photographer.
Whoa.
Yeah.
And does he spell it the same way? Or
he spells it with a CH.
Spells it with a CH.
Yeah.
And so I slowly collected in my mind. Then I heard you on the Normacast. My perception of who you were was different than the you I'm like getting to know. And I think it was like related to maybe there's like some, like you did a rap about Dean Potter or something.
Oh yeah.
I just kind of thought you were just different than who you actually are. But that's what rap is. That's the spirit of rap that you maybe were bringing into climbing in a way,
Yeah. I think we all wear a lot of different hats. Like we all have different sides of our personality. And one of the most important things about art in all its forms for me, be it music, visual art, written word, whatever, I can express different aspects of my personality through that art. And you're not going to get a complete picture of a person unless you see it all combined, you know?
Totally.
So it's very easy for people to get an idea of who I am based on one thing that they've seen. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah. It
is part of my personality. So I'm okay with it.
And I felt like I got to know you a little bit through the Enormocast interview. And then we just kind of started peripherally working together, and I'd see you more here at the Climbers Festival. We never, I don't think, actually truly met face to face because we were kind of internet friends.
Yep.
And then there was a fire drill at a gym
totally.
in Denver. And I just looked over and I was like, you're Kris Hampton. And we finally met.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I've had the pleasure with, just connecting with you a little bit. And we're doing a creativity and climbing workshop here in a little bit here at the Climbers Festival. But I really, I'm trying to connect every interview to this season of the podcast based around my book, The Desert.
Yeah.
And you really connect in a lot of ways, like the hip hop, the creativity, but especially being an independent artist.
Yeah.
In a independent business. And I feel like, we're in our 40s.
I'll be 47 this year.
He'll be 47. I'll be 43 this year. And we are kind of, in some ways, for lack of a better term, like OGs in the culture
it's
of climbing.
Funny you say that, because yesterday when I was putting this hat on, I asked my wife, should I tuck my ears in OG style or should I leave them out little kid style?
Yeah.
And she was like, I don't know. You do what you want.
But I feel like because we are OGs, and I don't know if you feel that way, but I feel like I want to impart whatever I can for free to the next generation.
Absolutely.
And just really give. And I guess that's why you're making time with me right now, and we're making time for that workshop, because we're not getting paid for any of this. And I think it's a beautiful thing about the Climbers Festival is it costs us money to be here. This is not. In some ways, it's a branding thing, but I just like the exchange of ideas. And I really get inspired by the Lander climbing community. But I want to go back just to the very beginning of...
Let's do it.
Because obviously the younger generation can learn from us in some ways, but then some stuff is just foreign. But
totally.
And I'm sure like tapes, like I was talking to I'm also a big Grateful Dead fan. I was talking to this 28-year-old about the Grateful Dead, and he didn't collect tapes. And I was like, that's the difference. That's the difference between a 42-year-old Deadhead and I didn't even never saw the Grateful Dead. I'm still like young in that sense. But where does this all begin for you of having, you work, you're the boss, you work for yourself, and I know a lot of people want to get to that, but where does your like 10,000 hour journey, because I'm sure you got maybe 10,000 hours twice at this point with how many different interests you have, but where does this whole journey to becoming like an independent businessman artist begin?
Actually, that's an interesting question, because I think all of the things I do, even though they can look really different from the outside looking in, they're all rooted in the same thing. Whether it's music, writing, art, training people, the podcast, whatever, is all rooted in sharing my ideas, sharing the things that are important to me. And I just fucking love to make things and give them to people. It's one of my biggest passions. And I think that's kind of where it starts. When I released my first hip hop tape in 1991.
As Odeb?
No, that name was given to me much later.
Okay.
After I became a climber. At the time, this was back in the days of horrible names. It was Crazy K, KRAZEEK. And I don't think anyone knows that but you and all the people listening now. Well,
if anyone knows about hip hop, every hip hop artist had another name. Like Biggie Smalls was, fuck, I can't remember now. But every rapper had a bad name before they got to their current one.
Yeah,
so,
horrible
Crazy
names
K.
out there. And I put this tape out in high school and started hearing people playing it in high school, even people that didn't like me, like that we were like enemies. They would be playing my tape.
Wow.
And I'd be like, oh, where'd you get that tape? And I just loved the aspect of being a little bit anonymous behind the work,
letting
the work do what it was going to do on its own. And then then people receive it how they want to. And I love that part of it. I can make it for a reason, and then people receive it maybe with an entirely different thing in mind. They may hate it, they may love it, it may resonate with them on some huge level. I have no idea, but I love that it's doing that it's out there taking on a life of its own.
So how do you go from Crazy K coming out with your mixtape to, I guess, like starting, like when did you start working for yourself, and like how did you get to that place?
Well, my very first like entrepreneurial venture, I actually found a cardboard sign after my grandfather died, and I was going through his stuff. I found a cardboard sign he had kept that I had stenciled Hampton Detective Agency on. And like, no case too small, 25 cents, So I've kind of been doing it forever.
Yeah. But I'm sure did you have a 9-to-5 at some point? Like,
I had a 9-to-5. I was a mural artist.
Okay.
I painted murals. I originally owned my own company, and then I sold it to someone else.
Gotcha.
Because I didn't like the business side of it.
Yeah.
I just wanted to paint. So I ended up running a different mural company that absorbed mine. And that's how I funded my rapping at the time. It's how I funded the beginning of Power Company.
And that's that's definitely a recommended path, I feel. Like there's, to have that side hustle, I guess is what the term is now.
Yeah, and if you're really passionate about it, you'll make time for it.
Totally, dude.
Totally. And it's a good way to weed out the things you're not really passionate about. Because if you're not, you won't make time for it.
Yeah. So, especially when you're young, you have more time than ever. Like your 20s, you basically have more time than you'll ever have in your life.
And I was really lucky to come up in Cincinnati at a time when the underground hip hop scene was really centralized in Cincinnati. We had Scribble Jam, this big festival every year for underground hip hop, graffiti writers, breakdancers, DJs, and all the names would come to Cincinnati and perform, and I would open up for a lot of these artists, and I would get to see the way these underground labels moved, so I got to see a little bit of behind the scenes and talk to people in Def Jux and in Rhyme Sayers and the Living Legends crew, and see how these crews moved, and I've shaped my entire business model based on that. Based on how an underground hip-hop label moves, grows their audience, puts product out. The podcast on my mixtape, it just goes out for free and brings people in, and then I'm creating merch constantly, new things.
That was something
big
that
releases now and then.
Not to cut you off, but that was something someone told me early on, of give stuff away for free, and I thought it was like the most bullshit advice.
And some people still do. Some people are like, never give anything away for free, and I'm like, dude, wow, that's been my biggest advertisement, and I don't pay for it.
Yeah, free wins too.
Yeah,
like I'm a big believer. Like that guy told me that. It was actually Tom Shadak, the guy who directed like Ace Ventura and stuff.
Oh, nice.
I think he's connected to Memphis Rock somehow as well.
I think so.
But he's a good guy. But I was like, you're full of shit. You're a millionaire. Like you're telling me to give me my books away for free when I don't have anything. And then I took him. I did it, and now I just. Like I'll probably give, I gave 500 or 600 zines away at this festival, and it's kind of the best thing. But I just wanted to highlight that for anyone, because I think a lot of young people start and they wonder like, where do they go, and how do they really start something? And I think it's like being at things like this and giving things away for free. And so you've obviously had that, like you got that from the hip hop culture.
Yeah, and I think you have to, value your worth. But you also have to separate that from the things that you can give away for free.
Yeah.
Those labels, those labels will make mixtapes. They'll do little community shows for free. But if somebody wants to book them at a festival, they're going to charge them.
Yeah,
for
exactly.
it,
Yeah.
So you have to determine what your worth is.
Yeah.
And determine how you can still live and exist, but what things can I still give away for free?
And that's a great point, because in the outdoor industry, there's definitely your time should be valued, and there's a lot of murky areas of getting free product or getting exposure.
Totally.
So yeah, you should always have your price. But I think that's the zine operates in the same way. It's like, people. We both rely on people to like use our products and
talk
that's
about
like
it,
super key.
Spread it around to their friends.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hand to hand advertisement. Mouth to mouth, face to face. That's the best.
Totally. Well, now we're on the topic of hip hop. A mutual friend of ours, Devin Dabney, who's another person. I've never met him in person, but we've worked together so much.
He was just here a couple of weeks ago.
Oh man. But he wrote this article that you did some art for in the most recent zine called "Get Sens or Die Tryin'," which is a great name, I thought.
Great article.
And it was a brilliant article. It was almost an article that I would have been pissed if I didn't publish it because originally it was going to get published in another publication. And for various reasons they didn't do it, but it was so brilliant. So I just want to talk to you about where you see the intersection of hip hop and climbing and what Devin's article might have opened up, because it opened up for me things I'd never thought about. And for anyone that hasn't read the article, it just compares the archetype of the gangster in hip hop and the dirtbag and climber, and brings out an intersectionality, obvious differences,
I think it's really interesting because, as a white person in hip hop, from the time I was, 10, 11 years old, starting breakdancing and then eventually starting rapping when I was 14 or 15. I only recently started being concerned about, am I appropriating? Like having that conversation with myself. And it's interesting because that was never a conversation amongst my black friends, amongst the hip hop community. Never a conversation, not one time,
Do you think it was the times?
I think it was largely just because we were all there for the love of it, and we all knew that. We were all interacting with it regularly. It wasn't a thing I found, changed my wardrobe overnight, decided I was going to be a rapper, and started rapping. It was this thing that I gradually moved into. I knew all these people from the skating rinks or from the hip hop shows, when I was old enough to get into the clubs. And so we all grew up together. But it's definitely something I've thought a lot more about. And I love that Devin connected the climbing world with the hip hop world in the way that he did, just drawing these parallels between the gangster archetype and the dirtbag archetype, and how we've sensationalized them both, and maybe misrepresented both, in doing so. Super interesting to me. I love the way his brain thinks.
And I thought the most interesting thing was they're both coloring in the lines of rebellion within society. And I think that's I've realized that like white privilege was a big part of my dirtbag experience. Just like doing
absolutely
the board, like
and my hip hop experience.
Interesting. Jon Stewart made this quote that is like, if I was black, I would be in jail for just the stupid shit I did, and like a long sentence in jail if he was black, just for the things that white males tend to get away with law enforcement.
I've gotten away with so much in my life. I mean, and it's interesting because I have 3 felonies on my record.
Jesus.
From
graffiti stuff, or you don't have to.
No, from stealing cars.
Okay, gotcha. Nice. That sounds like a short story.
I was super into boosting cars when I was 18 years old.
Wow, epic.
So I was sentenced to 4.5 years in prison. I only did 6 months.
Jeez.
And then got out.
Damn, dude.
And if I were to be that same 20-year-old kid, I would say, what do you mean privilege? I don't have privilege. I just got out of prison. And, I grew up in a poor community. But that's not what it's about. So many people miss that. The fact that I got out after 6 months is because I was, seen as a middle-class white kid. if I had been a black kid, it would have been an entirely different story. And I got away with so many things that I did and didn't get punished for, or my record would be 10 times as long. Privilege goes deeper than just the, I had or didn't have. It's what the system allowed me and didn't allow me.
Yeah, and I think a big thing of Devin's article too was it's a lot of it's male privilege too. Like
absolutely, I check all the boxes. You check the boxes,
Yeah, but then you have like a 50 Cent or a Jay-Z, especially like a 50 Cent. He's very much, and Jay-Z's embraced the capitalism too. But I think we all see Jay-Z as the high priest of the hip hop world, and he does a lot of he's like, I can't help the poor if I'm one of them type of, just like, Jay-Z is the icon. But yeah, 50 Cent is kind of like brazenly just embracing capitalism and is like, I'm going to fucking vote for Trump because my taxes are going to be lower,
Right.
But 50 Cent is the gangster outlaw, and that's the Get Censored Die Trying was after 50 Cent's.
Yep.
Super
Get Rich or Die Trying.
Or Get Rich or Die Trying, famous way he exploded on to the hip hop scene.
Yeah.
How long does your climbing rapping, how long were you a climber rapper, and how did that all transpire?
Man, I'm horrible at dates, so I have really no clue. It started because I was in a studio, and I'm pretty sure I was the only white person using this studio. My friend Gino Vega ran the studio. I was doing some things with his label, Power Blast, and I was in there recording and decided I wanted to loosen up and just play around. And I had written these lyrics about off-wits. And at the time I was super into climbing off-wits, written these lyrics that I thought were hilarious. And I'm like, he's going to have no idea what I'm talking about, but let me loosen up. And I'm just like, put the super thug beat on. He puts that on. I do this song just playing around. And then I come out of the booth and there are all these super thugged out guys waiting for their session. And they had all been in the room listening. And the booth was in an old bank vault, so there was no glass. I couldn't see who's in there. So I'm just wiling out, doing what I'm doing. I come out and these guys are like, what the fuck is off with, And within 30 minutes, they had all started using, and did for the next several months, using the word off with instead of off the chain or off the hook.
Oh, I love that.
And then that morphed into them calling me off with and giving me the name O-Dub. And I put that out on the internet and it exploded, and I made a bunch more, What
was you got a 99 problems, but
99 problems, but this pitch ain't one.
Yeah, I think that was one of the first O-Dub things I ever saw.
Yeah, I was doing a lot of parodies of other existing songs. And then I got a little bored with that and moved into all original stuff. That's where the Dean Potter song happened. And then I did a few albums, 3 or 4 climbing albums. I don't remember how many. And then I basically retired it until Devin was doing it.
Yeah.
And then I collaborated with Devin on a couple of songs because I had seen him mention me in places on the internet. And I had talked to him once or twice in person at a shoe demo and a comp. And I just loved what he was doing, and he's so much better at it than I ever was. And it just felt like this honor to collaborate with him. So
I feel the same way. I mean, he contributed all the music to this. Yeah, absolutely. He's in that phase too. I mean, it would be awesome if he was here right now, because we're in this phase of, we're in our 40s and we've got our kind of careers developed, and he's got so much going on. And I was at that stage when I was 30 because I think there's a lot of stereotypes of, you get out of college and then you get your job or whatever. But I think your artistic and professional paths, you can have these moments of, even when you're in your 30s or 40s, that you're like, I have to make some really big decisions now, and it's terrifying.
Yeah.
But I think if we all in this climbing community, like my vision for the climbing community is just to have people you can rely on. Like we've made it to this point now where someone in the younger generation can look to our generation and have some sort of blueprint that like this is actually a path to be like an independent. Because when you think about it, I mean, there's a lot of up and coming things, but there aren't that many long-term, super independent kind of. You're not exactly a one-person, a one-man show, but you're definitely a small independent business
for sure.
And we were talking about this before things started, so this would be perfect to kind of go into that. But what is your vision of like? Is being independent a way to enrich your life that you don't have a boss that you have to report to? Is it just something that naturally happened, or is being independent and keeping your own tempo with your own business and not just going for the maximum profit? Is that something that naturally happened beginning with, having your mural business and the mixtapes, or did you have to make that decision at some point? Like, I really want to be independent.
Honestly, my life would be so much simpler if I just had a boss to tell me what to do and I had a normal schedule. I would be climbing harder. My life would be easier. But it wouldn't be fulfilling for me at all. And that's what it all comes down to.
Yep.
Like I said in the very beginning of this thing, I really love making things and giving it to people. I love the act of mentorship. And for me, the podcast, the training plans, I put out so much free content and have for a decade plus. I do that as a form of mentorship. I love it. I only have so much capacity to connect with people on a one-on-one basis. Like Devin and I do, we talk a lot about these things, and he's always looking to me for advice, and I love being able to give it to him. But I hear from so many people who listen to the podcast and get something out of it, or who had a light bulb moment because they did a training plan and recognized something, or, that means so much more to me than if I'm just working in a shop somewhere. And that doesn't mean that working in a shop somewhere is a bad thing. This is just my needs, For me to exist as a human, I have to be creating. I can't not do it.
Yeah.
And I worked long and hard to make a situation where me creating means I can also make a living.
Yeah. And was that a struggle for
another
you
way.
to get to that point? Did you? I mean, it sounds like you started. I started my business much later, or starting businesses. It sounds like you had that entrepreneurial spirit.
Hampton Detective Agency.
Yeah, exactly. Do you have some struggles to share, or do you have some insight to share with that process and the uncertainty?
Yeah, there was a moment 3 years ago, I think, in Waco Tanks, where we were kind of living this dream life where my daughter had just turned 18. I gave her my house in Cincinnati. Felt like I was the luckiest, most privileged person on the planet to be able to do that. To hand over something to her, to help her in a way that my parents never could for me. But we, my wife and I, drove away from Cincinnati with my daughter standing in the driveway waving and crying, total role reversal.
Right.
And we just went on this, couple year long road trip, living in our truck camper, and first out of my element, then out of a truck camper. And we were in Waco Tanks in our truck camper. And I remember laying on the floor of the truck camper, just going, I'm shutting it all down. I'm fucking shutting it all down. It's done. I can't do it anymore. Because it is a struggle, You especially as you start to grow. If I kept it a one-man show, it wouldn't have been much of a struggle, because it was a side hustle for a lot of years, giving away free content as a blog, then as the podcast, then training plans. If I'd kept it a one-man show, relatively smooth sailing. But as soon as I bring people in, which I need to be able to grow, to be able to improve my quality of life, I brought Lana in to help. Nate came on as a coach. All that stuff made my life easier, but then I also felt this responsibility for them. And that made it harder, And I was letting the idea that we need to keep growing into my head. And as you do that, even though from the outside it looks like, oh, things are exploding, good for them, it also comes with a boatload of headache. And that's what was happening. And I was just like, I used to be fast enough to run behind this thing and keep up. And now it's pulled away from me and I can barely see it in the distance. And I feel like I'm losing it and I'm ready to shut it the fuck down,
You hit that like burnout
it took a couple
point
days for me to get out of there.
Yeah. Do you feel like that was a burnout or?
I think it was.
Yeah.
And maybe because I was spinning my wheels doing the same things.
Yeah.
I had, we constantly hear this like, these ideas of how you're supposed to run your business, conduct your business. You can't give anything away for free, hustling is bad for your health, It's all about, creating boundaries and all about rest time. And I'm like, well, I still have to fucking hustle. What am I doing wrong here?
Yeah. I'm not living the 4 hour. You heard of that 4 hour work week? Yeah, that's bullshit for a independent small climbing business.
Yeah, I do 4 hours of work while I'm sleeping.
Yeah, totally.
But then I just decided, you know what? What I've been doing has worked. I like doing creative things.
So like you were literally, you hit that point where you didn't know. Were you just at a crossroads or were you at like that point? You're like, I don't know if I can do this.
Yeah, for a couple days, it felt like crisis moment.
Sure, yeah.
Like from the outside, everything looked great.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. But on the inside, it was like shit exploding all around me.
Yeah.
And I felt super isolated in it at that moment.
And then you branched out and started a team from that point. Is that kind of what took the pressure off you? Or
I had a little team that was, for me, was creating more pressure. Because I felt pressure to keep them busy, to help them make money.
Yeah.
Ultimately, what I think helped me get out of it was allowing myself to be creative again. Like I had gotten too wrapped up in what I'm supposed to do, air quotes, for a business. And then I decided, you know what? I'm going to be creative. I'm going to make some new shit.
Yeah.
I'm going to, talk about whatever the hell I want to on the podcast.
Yeah.
I'm just going to be as authentic as I can be for a little while, see what happens. I'm going to flip the idea of what we're supposed to do as a business on its head and see what happens.
So, you've really been, I think, on my radar for that maybe time period. Like I've just started listening to your podcast in the last few years. So were you originally just training like material that you were creating?
Yeah, it started as a blog.
Okay.
That was just me deciding I wanted to be the best climber I could be.
What's a blog?
Exactly. When was that?
Is that like a mixtape?
They were little notebooks that you passed around with your friends.
Totally.
Started as a blog where I was just giving like my training experimentation, and that evolved into training advice. And
can I also? Sorry, I'm uploading a question on a question, but were you like obsessed with and then you transitioned into sport climbing? Is that?
Yeah, I quit climbing.
Okay,
I was super obsessed with crack climbing.
Yeah.
And then I kind of ran out of hard cracks to do around me.
Yeah.
And just got bored with it.
Yeah.
And wanted to do other things.
Yeah.
And I quit climbing to focus on music for about 5 years.
Wow.
I would climb once or twice a year.
Yeah.
I was still climbing like 512 cracks off the couch.
Yeah.
And then one day I went sport climbing with my friend Yasmin and tried to get up this 11A sport route and couldn't.
I think I remember you. Did you tell the story in the podcast recently?
Yeah,
that really inspired me actually to hear like, oh wow, okay,
couldn't get up it.
Yeah,
Yasmin had to finish it for me. Then I tried to top rope it and clean it, and couldn't get to the top, and she had to clean it for me.
Wow.
And then I was like, wow, I suck at this.
Yeah.
I want to get better at this.
Yeah.
This failure brought me some joy that I want to explore further.
Yeah.
So that's when I sort of transitioned into sport climbing.
Wow. Okay. So you're doing the blog, but you're not, because I know now you focus on a lot of wide-ranging conversations.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it connects to community.
It started as a training blog.
Yeah. And do you think that's
training podcast?
Do you think that's what led you to the burnout? Is that you weren't embracing your creative side? Because this reminds me of a conversation I had with Kris Parker.
Yep.
Musician.
Yep.
He's one of the few people I've heard of this, like the pull between music and climbing.
Mm-hmm.
But do you think you didn't have that, you weren't fulfilling that creative?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think when we listen to that, like, here's the step-by-step business advice. Here's how you make a business. And you're taking someone else's business plan and trying to apply it to yours, it completely strips away all personality from it.
Yeah.
Maybe not completely, but to some degree, the personality, the authenticity ends up stripped away. And all of these businesses end up looking the same, and inevitably they all fail because of that, or many of them do. I was feeling like I needed to listen to that business advice because I didn't know it. And it wasn't until I really embraced the idea of, this is an independent hip hop label. It's an independent hip hop label masquerading as a climbing training company. And I need to release new material.
Yeah.
I need to be creative with my new material. That's when I started feeling like, okay, now I got it, and I can keep rolling with it and keep building it. And you're exactly right. The podcast started as a training podcast. And there are times when I feel pressure to like talk more about training. But in my mind, it's more of a become a better climber. Not necessarily become better at climbing all the time.
Yeah.
Become a better climber, a better partner, a better community member, a better, steward at the crag. Whatever it is, I want to help you improve at that.
Yeah, and you're facilitating, I think, tough conversations. That's the beauty of podcasts, because a lot of us white males live in these rural areas where it's just a lot of other white people, and I think there's conversations people might want to have with people. They just don't know who to reach out to, and by reaching out to different people in the community and people from different races and different backgrounds, like you're facilitating a conversation that people maybe have the craving to have, but they don't have the luxury of having people to reach out to have that conversation. What are your thoughts on the conversations you've had in that realm, and in the growth that you've been looking for? That's what I'm assuming, that's what I look for in myself. I'm always trying to grow, and
for sure.
And we're obviously like at a big social reckoning. Like, I think I'm super impressed with this younger generation, and they seem more committed to like social justice, racial justice than maybe our generation was able to do.
Absolutely.
But I know we are part of that younger generation too, but I feel like they are maybe, it's maybe held on a higher pedestal for whatever reason than our generation was able to do.
We are, to some degree, you and I both, and many other people, are the mentoring voices for this generation, who's way smarter than us, who thinks more deeply about these things that really matter than we ever did. It's
so funny because it goes against the stereotype, like sometimes you can get old and crusty and write the younger generation off, but it's like, honestly, at this point, I'm like more disappointed in the older generation than
100%.
us. And then obviously there's like factions of people that are activists in those generations, but just
absolutely,
you look at just how this generation is coming together and like doing important work and facilitating conversations. And
I think often about, maybe often is the wrong word, but I do think to myself a few times a year, like, what are my greatest fears? And it used to be that I would be the kind of father my father was.
Gotcha.
And I've made sure I didn't do that. My daughter is 24. She has a daughter. So I know I did better than my dad did by a long shot. So my new fear is that I become old and crusty.
Yeah,
And
me too.
And am not keeping my mind open to this younger generation.
Yeah.
Total side note here, because I have a history with Devin of like saying, oh, we're going to do this thing, and then we have to do it.
Yeah.
Devin and I have been talking about doing a hip hop podcast that's like old head, new head, where it's like I play an album for him that was seminal for me in my young years and what I learned from it, what it meant to me, what it means to me now. And then he plays me an album that I may not have listened to because I am an old crusty hip hop head, you know?
Yeah, I think I heard a conversation with you and him and Mario, and you were Mario Stanley, and you were like, Action Bronson is the newest rapper I've heard of. I was like, Jesus Christ. Like,
no, I try to keep up on it, but my daughter actually likes a lot of the same music I like. So I end up thinking I'm getting the young rappers from her, but I'm not actually.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was total side note. I'm just throwing that out there so that Mario or Devin and I have to do that podcast.
All right. I love it. So creativity, and that's why we're kind of here in the park today. I'm excited. Last time we did a workshop on a Sunday at the Lander Bar, which was, I don't know how that got past our radars. That wasn't a good idea, but we still had a good conversation, and we'll have like 10 people we can just, be really have a great conversation with for an hour and a half. But I was listening to an interview with Kobe Bryant, one of Kobe Bryant's last interviews, and he did a lot of writing actually later on with animation and children's books. And
his animated short is amazing.
I've never seen it.
I just watched it a few months ago.
What's it called?
Amazing. I was gonna say For the Love of Basketball, but I don't think
something
that's
like
right.
That, though.
It's something like that because it reminded me of Love and Basketball, the movie.
Okay. Yeah.
The title did.
But he was so brilliant. But he was talking about how creativity really comes from organization and purpose and getting writing every morning or whatever.
Yeah.
Do you feel the same?
Purpose is huge for me.
Purpose is huge. Yeah. So you seem like you're in a good place where you've made that leap of the burnout of 3 years ago to where you're at now. Is that a correct assumption? You feel like you're in a good place with your creativity?
I feel really good about what my purpose is and the direction of it. And I feel like my mind is open enough to shift gears or change directions when needed, as well as, and maybe most important, admit when I'm wrong about something and have that conversation. And I prefer to have those conversations out in the open.
Yeah.
Where everybody else can learn from my mistake in a really visceral way. You know, it's not just me saying, I made a mistake, sorry, we're moving on.
Yeah.
It's more like, hey, where did I fuck up? Really tell me what was wrong. How can what do I need to do to make it better? Even if that's me having this conversation with myself.
Right.
I like to do that in person. And I feel like there have been some conversations I've had on my podcast that really directed me without me realizing it at the time. And I'm able to look back now and say, oh, these were important moments in the podcast, which were like talking with Shelma Junn, talking with Brown Girls Climb, which I did sitting here in the park.
That was a great episode.
At a climbers festival. We just sat in a circle and talked. And I've learned so much from those women over the years that now I feel like they're my mentors. I'm older than all of them, but they're way smarter than I am. And they think about this stuff in a way that I don't. And I'm trying to learn too. So those things are important to me. And I've gotten this pushback from some climbers, which I am 100% for. Bring the pushback. I relish it.
For having those conversations or like straying from training and
lots of people who are like, oh, you're just becoming a social justice warrior now. And I'm like, well, I'm a human. That should be, you should be a social justice warrior if you're a human. Period. So if that's how you see me, great. I hope you do. You know, there's pushback I will listen to and say, okay, you're right. And then there's pushback like that I'll be like, well, I hope you do okay living in the human race without caring about these things.
Yeah,
know?
or maybe you'll win them over in the long term too.
Yeah, maybe so.
Yeah.
I like to hide I've made this reference several times this weekend. I like hiding the medicine in the food.
Yeah.
You know? I think it's really effective. So I'm not going to constantly post on Instagram about social justice issues. I will if I've read into it, believe in it, understand what I'm posting. But I'm going to keep talking about training and climbing too. And I'm going to slip these things in and maybe change some people's minds, maybe piss some people off. That's okay.
Well, that's really interesting, like, take on creativity, you know? Like, because I look at creativity in the sense of writing, you know, because that's kind of my, like, 99% of my outlet of creativity is within the space of writing and creating the zine. And you're like looking at it from just being open-minded and creative with being in the world and having conversations you've had, and then like having, you know, like you said, putting your failures out there on record and then going back and like refining who you are as a human. Like that's such an interesting take on
I'm constantly re-examining my assumptions.
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to. And I'm an ADD creative.
Me too.
Like I have way too many things I want to do.
Yeah. Did they put you on Ritalin when you were a child?
No, they didn't. I don't even know if Ritalin was a thing in my neighborhood. Like doctors weren't even a thing in my neighborhood.
Gotcha.
So,
Yeah.
But I have been able to really tap into my creativity as of late by taking an idea I want to impart to everyone and then finding a bunch of different ways to say it. Because I'm such scattered creative, I'm like, I want to draw a thing that people can recognize this idea in. I want to write a thing. I want to have a conversation about it. I want to make a video about it. You know, I want to make a song about it. So I've been able to tap into my creativity that way, which has felt really good and really fills me up. You know, I've talked to Devin about this a little bit, where I'll do my creative work, and then if I go out to my gym to climb, a lot of us think of climbing as this creative thing, but I can't be creative if I've spent all my creative energy at work.
Yeah.
You know, and then if I'm at work doing busy work, just business stuff, I can go out in the gym and be creative. I have all this creative energy left over. So I can bring climbing into that as well. Either go out and do my circuits when I can't be creative, or go out into the gym and make up problems being creative. I've gotten better at spreading it around. That's worked really well for me.
Yeah. Wow. That's super interesting. A couple raindrops coming down.
Sure are. We need them.
Top 5 hip hop MCs.
Oh, man.
To wrap this up on.
Dead or alive?
Of course.
Devin and I were just having this conversation a couple of weeks ago. Do you want them in order or not in order?
Bro. In order, of course.
Fuck. I don't know if that's possible. Q-Tip, number 1.
Wow, I love that.
3 Stacks, number 2.
Oh. That's historically my number 1.
He's very close. That's why I asked in order. I have a hard time.
That's crazy. Yeah.
With 1 and 2.
All right. Do you think Tribe has? I've been noticing this lately. I feel like Tribe to me has more like longer staying power than Outkast, longevity wise. Maybe I just listened to Outkast too much in a certain time period, but
yeah, I don't know. I can listen to Tribe more.
Yeah.
Because the stuff I really love from Outkast is a little more boombastic.
Yeah.
Like I need to be higher energy when I'm listening
Bombs
to
over
it.
Baghdad. Yeah. True. Okay. I got you. Yeah.
But Tribe, I can like put on the record at home while I'm cleaning the house.
Like you're putting on an actual record.
Oh yeah.
I love that. All right.
Yeah. Like we play vinyl at my house quite a bit.
I do too. Yeah.
And I put on the Low End Theory regularly.
Yeah.
I think it's sitting on my record player right now, actually.
I love that. Love that.
So for me, it does have more staying power.
Yeah.
But I get so excited when I hear an Andre 3000 verse.
Yeah.
As the rest of the world does.
Yeah.
So you might be right. Maybe because I'm older.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is. Yeah.
So Q-Tip, Andre 3000. My definition of MC, Black Thought has to be in there. He hasn't made the best songs, like in terms of like popularity or sales. But as an MC, I can't not have Black Thought in there.
And his freestyle that he did a couple years ago was just proved like
ridiculous.
Yeah, it was insane. Yeah,
ridiculous.
It was like 9 minutes or something. Yeah,
amazing.
Look that up, hip hop fans. If you're still listening and you're a Black Thought hip hop fan. Yeah.
God, this is hard. I really want to put Eminem on there because of how he impacted me when I was younger. He's Scribble Jam alumni.
Really?
You know, yeah.
No shit. So you saw him
a lot when he was younger.
That's incredible.
And I would spend time in Detroit because it was not far from Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Spend time at the hip hop shop. And so that whole Detroit crew and Cincinnati crew were a little like sisters.
Yeah.
You know.
So you saw 8 Mile in real life.
Well, I mean, tiny bits of it.
Yeah. I mean, was there a time where he wasn't? Was he where he was just okay, or was he always like commanded?
He had a really great underground release back then that was very much underground rap. And to his credit, he really drastically changed his style to fit the platform he got, which I think is amazing.
Yeah.
And overlooked in terms of the importance of a musician. But as a battle rapper, which is how I first saw him battling at Scribble Jam.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
His punchlines were amazing. He had this like very much like he does in 8 Mile actually. This like underdog look and quality and almost like staring at his feet, scared.
Yeah.
But then he would just unleash, which was very cool to watch.
Yeah.
I think he got beat by Juice.
His
first year at Scribble Jam, Chicago MC.
Yeah.
And Juice is amazing as well.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get off track here so I don't have to answer my last two.
I mean, dude, that's amazing that you got to see that.
I feel really lucky to have been in the right place at the right time, watching Atmosphere come up, watching Aesop Rock come up, watching Def Jux and Rhymesayers become Def Jux and Rhymesayers.
Right. Yeah.
Getting to have conversations with Idea after he performed, and he was on this like
Idea and abilities.
Yeah. He's like, I'm doing this different thing and I'm not sure people are getting it.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting down with him and he's almost teary. Like, I don't understand if people are understanding.
Yeah.
And I'm like, honestly, I don't know if it matters. Like, people saw your passion up there.
Yeah.
That's what struck me.
Yeah.
I'm going to buy the record and I'm going to listen to your lyrics because I love your lyrics. But your performance was one of the best performances I've ever seen.
Well, and that's a good wrap up for all this too, is that, and I've had this as well, it's like low points, or you wake up in the middle of the night and you're like, this isn't going to work anymore. I think that's a good point that maybe younger creatives to hammer in, that just like we all hit these low points and then you just deal with them and then you kind of come back.
And if you're doing something new, you can't expect everybody to catch on immediately. It's new.
And they're probably not like that. Going back to Kobe Bryant too, he had to self-publish his children's books,
right?
Because he was making them in a different way that wasn't just princesses. And Kobe Bryant, who has all the connections in the world, had to start his own children's book publishing thing because people didn't get it. And then he goes on to win.
Couldn't get signed.
Jay-Z couldn't get signed. Kanye West couldn't get signed. Yeah.
That's an interesting story too. Jay-Z couldn't get signed, and then Jay-Z wouldn't sign Kanye West.
Until he until he
stood
on his table and rapped to him, or whatever the story is. Yeah.
So I think anytime you're going in a different direction, it's always going to be drawing inspiration from somewhere else. But I like the idea of doing new things and being a little confusing to people. Like, they're like, why do I like this? Why do I need this? This isn't something I've thought about before.
Yeah.
I enjoy that. And I think most really creative people enjoy that. And it could feel hard and scary and like it's not working at first because we've been taught this like overnight success model.
Right.
But that's not reality.
No.
And you have to keep working at it. You have to stay authentic to your vision. You have to let your vision change if that's where you feel like you need to go. And then, if you're making a dope thing, it will work eventually. People will catch on as you believe in it more and more and more for longer and longer.
And you get towards your 10,000 hours.
Yeah. That's what I love about what you do.
Yeah.
Like you were building a thing at a time when print magazines were faltering. But doing it in a really authentic way to your vision, to the voice that you saw needed in the climbing community. And you were just like, this is a print magazine. This is by climbers, for climbers. This isn't a watered down version of climbing media. I'm gonna say the things I need to say, and that's why I love that you published Devin's article. I talked to Devin when he was talking to the other publications and was having some issues, and I was like, pull it, man. Don't put it out there if they want all these changes. Give it to Luke. Luke will print it, and he had worked with you in the past, and it just made sense. And I love that you're the authentic voice in the climbing world.
We're trying to give people their voice, or just publish. That's a editing style that I use that a lot of other publishers don't. Is that I edit to embrace their style, which versus making it one style, and I think that's been very effective. And then whatever modern audience is consuming this, because I know my audience is like 16 to 80 or whatever. It's like they're craving that, and that goes back to. And there's a reason Devin's come up so much is because he's doing something creative within the climbing space that someone like me or you that's like kind of philosophical type people are like, oh, I didn't even think about this, and I've been thinking about this my whole life. And
he's young.
Yeah,
he's authentic. He falters sometimes in his belief in himself, but has the foresight, the ability, the skill to be able to reach out to people as mentors to help him through those situations, which is something I am terrible at and want to get better at. I love being one of those voices for Devin because it helps me see how he moves in that space. So that I get better at it.
That's really interesting that we need that too. It's like we are the mentors to a lot of generation. We want to take that on, whether it's in the various forms. But we need to be vulnerable and look out for other ways we can do our stuff better and have our own. And there are older people in our community that can mentor us, but sometimes it's even younger people that can bounce an idea. We can bounce an idea, or just being there for each other, being of the same ilk. All right, dude, you got one left.
Fuck, dude, is it just? I think I have two left. Actually,
you said Black Thought, Q-Tip, Andre,
Black Thought. Oh, I want to put Eminem in there.
Yeah,
I have to put Jay in.
Yeah.
I think his longevity can't be overlooked. I just played, an early Jay-Z Jazzo song for my wife. And she's like, this is really fast. And I'm like, yeah, this is how people used to rap.
Yeah.
And Jay-Z in his first appearance was the best at it,
Yeah.
And he's been able to...
But it's certainly not... You don't look at it like, that's good. You don't see the Jay-Z you see now. Like,
not now.
Yeah, if any hip-hop fans Google the early Jay-Z stuff, he kind of almost sounds gimmicky.
Yeah, like Hawaiian Sophie, I think, was the first big song he was on.
Quali references that.
Yeah.
Did you read Quali's book?
I have not read his book. I actually have been meaning to get it. I'm glad you
should have brought it
that.
up. Maybe I'll mail it to you.
Quali is somebody I got to watch become a star.
No kidding.
High Tech, who produced
is from Cincinnati,
Black
right?
Star, is from Cincinnati. I've known High Tech forever.
Yeah.
And I got to watch Black Star early on, some of their first shows.
Dang.
So watching that stuff happen really helps me believe in a vision, doing a thing.
Yeah.
But I have to put Jay on for the reason that he's been so good at changing his style, shifting his views. You know, I know 444 is not necessarily mentioned in his like best albums by a lot of people, but I think the vulnerability of like Beyonce putting Lemonade out, which basically is like, if Jay responded poorly to Lemonade, it could have been the end of Jay's career.
Of course,
you know?
yeah.
But Jay instead said, I fucked up.
Yeah.
You know, and he did.
Yeah.
So being able to admit that, to make this creation, to put this out there into the world in the way that he has also been the gangster, been the hustler, been the mogul, been the boss.
Yeah.
Put it out there in that same format and be vulnerable. Brilliant and beautiful, and speaks to the growth of this man, and I can't overlook that, because it's what I hope to be able to do.
Yeah. And that's full circle with the whole conversation too, of what climbers are, what we are as far as what our story is I think we're at just creating the start of climbing culture now.
Yeah.
You know, the Stone Masters 70s dirtbag image is what is the archetype, and then the gangster is the archetype of the hip hop world. But I think Jay-Z could be the perfect example of like where climbing could go if a guy who's just like, you know, like Big Pimpin' Jay-Z,
right,
versus, you know, 444, like I'm in therapy, I'm growing as a human being.
Right.
I'm like I'm a billionaire, yet I have all these cracks in my armor, but that's who I am. And I think that's who we all need to be. You know, even if you are the strongest climber, you probably have these vulnerabilities, and some of the strongest climbers get that way because they have, or the most successful people get to that place because of their the cracks in their armor or whatever. So, shout out to Jay-Z.
yeah. I wish Devin was here because he can do a Jay-Z voice.
Yeah, we'll do another episode.
Hove.
We'll do another episode with Devin. So put that on the things to do with Devin. But dude, thank you so much. This is awesome, and we're gonna go do a workshop here in a little bit. And yeah, Kris and I are here for you. We survived some trials and tribulations, and we want to do everything we can for the climbing community. So
yeah, and you know, don't hold me to that top 5. I may change my mind tomorrow.
Right on, brother.
Thanks, Luke. I appreciate it, man. You know, to be honest, if you're a hip hop fan out there and you have a top 5 dead or alive list that hasn't changed in 10 or 15 years, you're just not paying attention anymore. That's really all it comes down to. Luke, thanks so much for the good conversation. I'm looking forward to the next one. For all of you out there, you can find Luke at the links in the show notes in your pocket supercomputer. Those will take you to the Climbing Zine. They'll take you to the Dirtbag State of Mind podcast. You'll be able to find all of Luke's books, all the things that he does. The guy is creative for days, and I love seeing somebody use their creativity to fuel the rest of their life. So go check out Luke. Go check out what he's doing. I am just about to get in the car and head to Joe's Valley for the Joe's Valley Bouldering Fest, and I'm really looking forward to seeing all of you out there. Come see us at our table on Saturday at the trade fair. We're having a massive sale of a lot of our products, particularly our bouldering products, our boulder bag, our crag kit, our finger files, all those things. Big sale for everyone who will be in attendance. You can also take my clinic, Better Boulder Tactics, and you'll find a link for that right there in your show notes, in your pocket supercomputers as well. All right, you know where to find us, powercompanyclimbing.com. You can find us on the Instagrams, the Facebooks, the Pinterests, the YouTubes, at Power Company Climbing. And Luke is probably on the Twitter because he's a writer. But you're not going to find me there because we don't tweet, we scream like eagles.
Audio.